Ready. Artificial intelligence is ushering in a new era of scientific research. From biology to physics, AI-driven tools and techniques are poised to expand our understanding of the world.
Forms of artificial intelligence have been used in science for years, but the rise of generative AI is unlocking greater speed and accuracy.
AI-driven simulations have the potential to streamline the search for new drugs. And in genomics, algorithms can sift through genetic information, identifying patterns and disease markers that would have otherwise taken years to uncover through human efforts.
And it can help with hypothesis generation by analyzing papers, suggesting new research directions, and even predicting potential outcomes.
So in this episode of AI IRL, we'll explore what having an AI assistant in the lab will look like, and what science moonshots AI will bring closer within our reach. Sam Rodriguez, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Of course, yeah. Great to be here.
So you're a scientist and an entrepreneur that's spent his career developing new technologies that help neuroscientists better understand the brain. You also just started a new organization called Future House that's backed by ex-Google CEO Eric Schmidt that's dedicated to science moonshots using AI. Why don't you talk to us about some of the breakthroughs you're hoping to achieve?
What we're interested in doing is building an AI scientist. Okay. And, essentially what that means to us is building an AI to which you can delegate some of like the tasks of science as scientists. So I'm a scientist, right? Like you said, I've been a neuroscientist, a bioengineer. I actually started out originally as a physicist. Throughout all these different areas of science, basically, you encounter situations like, for example, maybe you have an idea and you really want to know, like, has anyone done this before, right? Has anyone studied this before? Has anyone tried, building this device or like conducting this experiment or whatever? You literally like cannot go and read the entire literature on your own, right? Another example, you collect some data set and you have like 100 different ideas for how to analyze it. And you literally don't have enough capacity as one person to go and like analyze your data set in all the different ways that you can imagine doing it. Science is like really bottlenecked by our ability to go and do these tasks. And so our idea is that actually we're getting to the point where we're going to be able to build AIs that can like do science themselves, that can assist us with tasks like analyzing data, like going and searching literature, et cetera. And that this will lead to a major speed up in the pace of research throughout science. And so we're really focused on biology, but I think that the impacts here will be everywhere from physics, chemistry, like climate, energy, basically all areas of science are going to be touched by the AI scientists that we're trying to build.
Future House is a nonprofit organization. Is there a reason you didn't want to do this as a private company?
Well, our 10-year mission is to accelerate the pace of discovery and to make cutting edge access to cutting edge scientific expertise like available worldwide. That is not a mission that will necessarily yield a profit in the next 10 or even 20 years. It might, but it might not. If we were for profit, we would get pushed into making a drug really, really fast, so that we could provide returns to our investors. And obviously drugs are important, but we think we can have way more impact if we pursue this longer term vision. And we're lucky enough to be backed by people who want to support us in doing that.
So let's say I'm a scientist. I have my AI companion helping me crunch some of the numbers. Where do I fall in the scientific process? Where do humans' role come in?
At the end of the day, AI is a tool that allows us to do the things that we want to do better. The fundamental thing that humans will always do is decide what they want. Right. So if I'm a scientist, I will be saying, hey, I would like to investigate this. I would like to study, for example, how neurons are connected to each other in the brain. And I want to test specifically these hypotheses. And then you'll have your AI assistants or the AI scientists that you're working with that will go off, and you'll be able to direct them in particular directions to go and come up with hypotheses or go through the literature and come up with experiments, plan out those experiments, execute those experiments, et cetera. But the humans at the end of the day are going to be the directors, right? The orchestrators. They're going to be the ones who are deciding what needs to be done, evaluating the evidence and figuring out basically where they want to put their resources.
Talk to us about some of the limitations and also the risks of using AI in science, because I know ChatGPT is only one example, but it's still fairly, in the early stages, and it's inaccurate sometimes. The stakes are much higher when it comes to things like drug discovery.
Oh, yeah. And I think that the inaccuracies that you need to worry about, it's like whether these tools can be used for antisocial purposes, right? Whether people can use them to come up with bioweapons and things like that. Huge, really serious risks here. And these are things that we think about a lot. And so I think the main thing is making sure that you have partnerships and dedicate a lot of resources whenever you build a new AI powered tool to testing how it can be used nefarious or otherwise ill purposes, making sure that you put safeguards in place so that it cannot be used in those ways.
When it comes to bioweapons, that sounds terrifying. How big of a threat is it right now with AI in its current form?
It's difficult to make bioweapons for the same reason it's difficult to make drugs, actually, that we really don't understand human physiology. We lack a lot of basic information about human physiology. And so therefore it's very hard to cure disease. It's also very hard to develop targeted weapons that can mess with your body. So I'm not meaning to minimize the risk, but I think that this is not something that I am personally acutely worried about in the near term.
So it's not like someone in his garage has the potential of building a biological weapon.
Yeah, I think at the moment that is highly unlikely. We have a long way to go before we're at the point where someone could use the AI to build a biological weapon in their garage in a way that they could not do without the AI, right? So already, you can search Google and you can, try to figure out how to make a biological weapon in your garage. And people could do that before they had ChatGPT. And there are people studying right now whether ChatGPT makes it easier or not. I think that there's a long way to go before it becomes really, easy enough that it's really scary.
And I think that's really useful because you help us paint that picture that this isn't about throwing an AI at a problem and suddenly solving a question that we couldn't solve before, but it is about speeding up the process that is involved in trying to answer that question. And I think that's really useful exactly to keep in mind, right? And that's what we're talking about almost with the bioweapons. It's all part of that same argument that we have so much to do. AI just helps us get through some of that stuff, not actually solve the problems.
It helps us get through it, and it will help us get through it much faster. Building an AI scientist will not just help science, it will help AI also.
What is the next frontier?
The next frontier after the AI scientist.
Yeah, after you solve all this AI scientist related stuff, which sounds like a walk in the park. So
yeah, we'll be, check back in a few days. We'll probably have finished it, right? Accelerating discovery research, after we have access to an AI scientist that will make science move much faster, we need to understand how fundamental biology works so that we can cure diseases. And, I'm hopeful that there are many, many diseases that we currently struggle with that we will have treatments for or cures for in our lifetimes by virtue of the acceleration that will come from, from combining AI, from bringing AI into science. So that's thing number one. And then thing number two is on the other side, once we have an AI scientist and people are able to benefit from access to that expertise, I really hope that the quality of medical care, for example, will get much, much better worldwide.
Sam, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. This was great.
Dr. Prabhakar, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here with both of you.
So you're President Biden's scientific advisor, and you also lead the Office of Science and Technology. You also spent a lot of time at DARPA, which is the federal agency that developed technology like GPS and the foundations of the internet. Many people don't know that. And that's because government today isn't exactly known for being at the cutting edge of technology. Can the rise in AI mark a change in that, where government plays a bigger role in driving innovation versus playing catch up to the private companies that are developing it?
Well, AI is changing a lot of things right now, and that's why President Biden's been extremely clear that it's one of the greatest opportunities of our times, and it's going to come with risks that we have to manage. And the work that's underway, the White House has been driving a lot of forward action here in this area. That work is about managing risks, but it's also about seizing the opportunities. And some of those big opportunities from AI are about the research that continues to be funded by the federal government.
So do you think that government can be a driver of innovation in this new age of AI versus just relying on private tech companies to come up with that technology?
Well, we're seeing a surge, and we're very happy that that surge in AI technology has come from American companies. It builds on the shoulders of many, many, many decades of publicly funded R&D, and now what the companies are doing on top of that. So I very much see it as a system where all the pieces have to work together. I spent half of my professional life in public service, but the other half in commercial technology, and every big thing this country has ever done has taken all of us, and that's certainly going to be true for seizing these opportunities from AI as well.
What are some of the moonshots that the US government is currently working on that could incorporate AI in advancing them?
President Biden likes to talk about this being the only country in the world that can be defined in a single word, and that word is possibilities, and that's what science and technology is all about. So I'll mention a couple of areas. One very important area of focus is changing health outcomes. And in this area, the President and the First Lady last year reignited their cancer moonshot. It set an extremely aggressive goal of cutting the age-adjusted cancer death rate by half over the next 25 years. That's about double the rate of progress that we've been making on cancer. The other goal that went with that is to change the experience of people and their caregivers and their families as they are all going through this cancer experience. And if you think about it, who isn't touched by cancer? This is one of the most foundational things and an area where everyone in this country can pull together for a moonshot goal that really, really matters. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, to do that, we need to prevent more cancers. We need to detect more cancers quickly so that they can be caught. And we need better treatments for when cancer does move forward. And all in every one of those areas, from public health to developing new drugs to tailoring clinical care for an individual, every one of those is an opportunity for AI to help accelerate progress in some very dramatic ways. So that's one huge example. I could tell you a similar story about dealing with all the effects of climate change as they're coming, modeling extreme weather and helping the country be more prepared for resilience.
Could you expand a little bit on your outlook on how that could be achieved?
Well, let's step back for a minute. What these AI systems are so powerful that they can seem magical, but really what they are doing is statistics at an extraordinary scale. So large language models that led to chatbots are about training these systems on human language so that they can build statistical estimates of answers to your prompts. When you're thinking about something like weather, that's another very, very, very complex system. Think about how huge the atmosphere is that surrounds the world. Think about how complex the calculations are when we run simulations to try to estimate how the weather will progress in the short term. And then think about how hard that problem is when we're thinking about climate effects over many years and many decades. That is the complexity that AI helps wrangle because of this new approach of training a computer on a lot of data so that it can build better estimates of what could happen in the future. And harnessing that power is going to lead to some very practical advances, we think, in both understanding weather better, but also understanding long-term climate effects. That's what's going to help us be more prepared and more able to deal with what's coming.
And obviously, the US is a huge key driver in developing AI technologies. But I'm curious, as a non-US citizen, who do you see elsewhere in the world doing interesting things?
Well, this is a global technology. First of all, again, AI, it seems like magic, but it really is human beings and corporations that are building compute, that are training it on data. They're using algorithms that are developed in research communities and widely shared. And so the ability to build AI of various sorts, it happens around the world. And in fact, I think that's good because there's so many applications globally that we'll want to pursue. But of course, it does mean that it really comes back to the question of what kind of a future we're going to build. And if you think about it, it's such a powerful force right now. Every country around the world is using AI to build a future that expresses their own values. And I think this is why it is so important that like-minded countries with democratic values and norms come together and agree about how we're going to build the rules of the road for AI.
You're advising President Biden on this new age of artificial intelligence. How is the Biden-Harris administration thinking about AI?
The starting point for this administration is what the president talks about every time he talks about AI. He sees its power and its potential, and every time he talks about it, you can hear his optimism about all the things that it's going to bring, and he's very clear-eyed that that doesn't come for free and that managing its risks has to go hand in hand with it. President Biden frequently talks about the fact that we're at a pivotal moment in history in which the choices that we make in the next few years are going to shape many, many decades ahead. AI for him is very much part of this moment. And that's why you've seen this administration move out so actively with urgency, starting by listening to all kinds of communities. We talked about the work that we've done with industry, but also we've had very active engagement with civil society.
Dr. Prabhakar, thank you so much for joining us.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Anima and Kumar, thank you so much for joining us. So you're a professor at Caltech and you're senior director of AI research at NVIDIA.
Which actually makes you the perfect person to answer a question that we've had, which is really broadly, how is AI changing, or has it been changing the scientific process over the last couple of years? Let's begin with that.
Yeah, this is such an exciting time. Thank you for having me on this show. And, the world has seen ChatGPT and the power of AI when it comes to language models. But to me, that's just the beginning, because beyond language, we can think of all kinds of scientific processes. And by understanding that through AI, we can do everything better, faster, cheaper, more accurate, and really be able to come up with new inventions and discoveries.
Let's dig into that. What does an AI-enabled lab look like?
Yeah, to me, like AI will completely transform the scientific workflow the way we know it. Ever since the 17th century or even earlier, the way we came up with new inventions or discoveries was somebody has some intuitions, right? They went to the lab, they tinkered, they're like, oh no, this doesn't work. And okay, this works, let's move ahead.
Trial and error.
Right? Exactly. And now think about AI being able to do that in the virtual domain, like being able to accurately simulate many of the processes or learn from data, right? The observations directly. And with that, be able to come up with better design, better discoveries than what would have taken really long in the real world.
What's changing the most right now? When you look at the landscape, is there any particular field that you see evolving much more quickly than any other field?
I mean, one thing that we're working on heavily is the Earth-2 project at NVIDIA, where our goal is to build very accurate digital twins of this planet. Be able to predict not only short-term weather, but also long-term climate change eventually.
The digital twin of the Earth, what is being twinned?
Yeah, all the processes on this planet. Think of like the atmospheric processes of convection currents, storms, right? Even really like fine scale features of cloud turbulence, what's responsible for hurricanes, for instance, how would this hurricane paths change, and can we come up with the right risk assessment? Because these are chaotic systems. These hurricanes can go in so many different ways. Can we really hone in on what is the risk to different human populations based on what we see today? So these cheaper and faster weather forecasts with AI will also enable us to create better probabilistic assessment of extreme weather events.
Let's talk about some of the other fields that AI is making transformations in the scientific process. For example, genomics or even drug discovery. What's going on there?
Oh, it's such an exciting time there because, the same kind of generative AI that we see for language, you can replace the letters of the English alphabet instead with nucleotides. ATGC, if you recall, what makes up our DNA, right? And with that, letters, you can now ask the language of the genome and have a model learn that.
So if there are tasks that artificial intelligence can make more efficient or even replace humans in a lab, what's kind of the vibe in the scientific community? Is there as much fear as there is in other industries that AI could take their jobs?
I mean, I don't think it'll happen anytime soon and maybe never because humans are such creative beings, right? We're always thinking of the, next unknown question, right? There's so many deep mysteries of the universe. There's so much we still need to understand. And AI is a tool. This will enable lab scientists to rule out a lot in simulation before they can go and do their experiments. So they only need to do a few. But then I feel like there'll be always things that'll be still unknown and to be conquered.
There's a lot of, I don't want to use an unpleasant word, but there are a lot of people who don't believe in things like climate change. And there are a lot of skeptics who believe that science is out to get them or that, we're all just sitting here lying. Is there work being done that you think could actually win over some of these skeptics? Is there a way to demonstrably show them?
Yeah, I do think all the work we're doing will help towards this because, this is not some model that's in some supercomputing facility, right? Not available to the public. I mean, you can download this and go try some of this yourself. Just like a video game, you can play the game of climate change one day, right?
Quantum physics.
So everything becomes accessible. At least my hope is, chunk of the community that is curious will have resources online that is much more open so they feel like they can participate in that.
If you think about the scientific journey that humanity's been on over the last 300 years, it's been quite good. Just take us 10 years from now. Like, how different will things be?
I think the whole process of scientific research and development will be accelerated many, many times, right? Even orders of magnitude in some areas. And that'll just mean that we can quickly rule out things that don't work and hone in on things that work. Certainly, drugs designed by AI, they're already coming into trials and that'll just increase fully. Personalized medicine for cancer and all of these where we really haven't been able to understand, right, for various different targets, how to quickly design drugs. This can make it much faster and also cheaper because right now so many of these treatments are too expensive to be done at scale. So it'll make this democratized and cheaper. And yeah, I think this will hit every area. I don't think any area is immune to this.
I think it will be interesting, won't it? 10 years' time, if it takes the average drug 10 years to come to market, and if AI systems right now are coming up with some of the potential candidates for a future successful drug, then in 10 years' time, are we going to see a waterfall of new drugs?
I mean, it may not be a huge number, right? Because you can't test all of them. It'll be more targeted. It will be personalized. It will
actually work.
Exactly, effective.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank
It's
you
been
both.
fascinating. Yeah. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah.